As Kendra said, I'm Roy Stevens. I'm executive director and founder of Dreams Incorporated, which is based in Flint, Michigan. It's centered around fostering resiliency in our youth. So one of our biggest challenges right now is moving past the water crisis and the trauma that we're encountering. I think you guys have done a great job of pointing it out. So we have a lot of people that's able to point out what's going on, and our focus is right now is making sure our youth can move past that. And I think that's my part of the journey or the battle. But as I read about David Wheaton, I don't know. I feel like I should hear some type of prize fight music or some type of theme music going on because he's truly a fighter. David Wheaton currently serves as the Economic Justice Policy Fellow at the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. As a fellow with LDF, David uses advocacy in public education to increase fairness and equal opportunity for Black Americans in all aspects of the economy. David previously served as advocacy director at Texas Houser. In that position, David supported grassroots leaders across Texas and developed and advanced policies and practices that promote the purpose of the Fair Housing Act. David played a major role in litigation involving federal disaster mitigation funds, where the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Affairs found that the state of Texas discriminated against people of color in their appropriation of federal disaster funds. David was also heavily involved at the Texas State legislator, was involved in the Texas State Legislature, fighting for more affordable housing and tenants' right legislation. Before joining Texas Housers, he was staff attorney and legal fellow at the Capital Appeals Project Promise of Justice Initiatives in New Orleans, Louisiana, where he helped handle appeals for incarcerated people on death row in Louisiana and Mississippi. Everybody put your hands together and welcome this fighter to the podium, please.
All right, thank you, everybody. I know we are about to head out, and so hopefully we're going to make this something that you guys can remember while you head back. Does this go to the next slide if I click? Is it on there? Okay, cool. I can't see it, so y'all just make sure you're good with it. Okay, cool. So I'm here to talk about SRF and state revolving loan funds. And so just to give us a few definitions of what SRF is and what state revolving loan funds are. SRF is a federal state partnership that provides low-cost financing for a wide range of water quality infrastructure projects. The SRF program is one of very few ways in which local municipalities have access to capital to fund major infrastructure investments in clean water. SRF funds are allocated by states, to states by the EPA to support low-cost financing for a wide range of water quality infrastructure projects. Recipients are federally subsidized. And so, go to the next one. So why is SRF important? SRF loans benefit from below market rate interest rates, which can result in significant cost savings compared to loans from private lenders that a municipality could get from a bank or bonds from Wall Street. The state program is one of very few mechanisms to provide capital to local municipalities to fund major infrastructure investments in clean water. And again, and so then we go to the next slide. So how does SRF affect low-income and Black communities? Black communities like Jackson, Baltimore, Flint, Detroit, Cleveland, and other marginalized communities continue to suffer most from water quality and affordability issues. Federal funding for water infrastructure, which peaked in the 1970s, has declined 77% since then. State funding for water has also greatly decreased over time. As a result, municipal water systems across the country have looked to customers to bridge that gap through higher rates and aggressive shutoff and lien policies, which we have seen in Detroit, which we saw in Cleveland, Baltimore, and other predominantly Black cities. So for this next part, I'm not going to use the PowerPoint, and we're going to talk a little bit amongst your tables about some water quality projects that y'all would like to see. So I just want to set the table for that. One of the things that, you know, when we talk about SRF funding and how much money our states are getting, how many people are here from Michigan? Got a lot of people here from Michigan, okay? The state of Michigan in 2021 received about $190 million in SRF funds, okay? 190 million, just in 1 year, okay? How many people are here from Illinois? I know we got some Chicago people in here. Illinois, got one, just one, you got 2 Chicago people in here. The state of Illinois was given around 220 million in SRF funds to fund clean infrastructure projects. Anybody here from, we got some Toledo people. Anybody here from Ohio? All right, got one. We got a few people here from Toledo. Ohio was given $230 million in SRF funds to fund their community in water structure projects, okay? So what I want everybody to do, if you have people in your tables, I want you to think about what type of projects would you want to fund in your communities if you had access to 200 million 1 year. Again, this isn't over 5 years. 1 year, your community is going to get around $200 million. We're going to do 5 minutes. Just talk amongst your table. What would you like to do with $200 million? What type of water quality projects would you like? What type of funding would you like to see go into your community? What would y'all want to do with that $200 million? I'm going to start the clock now. So that was great to hear what so many other people would do in their communities. So I now want to get to what's actually happening with the 200 million and all the money that's actually going into SRF funding. So the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, did a study of SRF funding, and it showed that less than 20% of that funding goes to disadvantaged communities. And so as our organization was looking at what was happening in Jackson and what was happening in Baltimore, who also had an E. coli crisis, we wanted to know what the state was doing and where the SRF funding and money was going. And so I'm going to use Baltimore as an example of how money is not getting to the communities. It is not getting to our state systems or our city systems so that we can actually have an impact on our water system. So, okay. So if you guys are looking up at this cluster right here, so I'm gonna, it's can't really see, but this is as white, more white. This is more black. As you see, most of the funding is skewed where? More white, right? So this is more white, more rural communities. Okay. You can't see the city, but this 208 proposals funding per capita, this is Baltimore. This is the largest city in Maryland. This is 208 number. This number right here represents a white community in Maryland that only has 6,000 residents. Wow. This represents another white community in Maryland. That's about 25,000 residents. Again, Baltimore, 208, has about 600,000 residents. What? They're not getting their fair share, right? This community in this county right here, the city right here, also has less than 15,000 residents. So we see the smaller, the more white, the more rural the community is, the more SRF funding they are getting in their communities.
Does that have anything to do with new development?
It does not, but we can get into why new developments are bad.
Why is that?
So that's a great question. We're going to get to like one of the reasons why the numbers are this way. But one of the reasons why the numbers are this way is because that's how the state of Maryland wants it to be. unfortunately, right? And so what we are trying to do as a coalition is work with the state of Maryland to make sure that they're putting disadvantaged communities first in their application process. But a lot of it has to do with how the state of Maryland puts their SRF applications in. And so it disadvantages the city of Baltimore, it disadvantages Prince George's County, which is a predominantly Black county, just because of where they're situated in their state and how their applications are being processed. But these are just more factors to show you. But as you it is not Columbia, Maryland. No. Where Annapolis, yes, no, Annapolis is very much funded. As you see, that it's just great that you asked that question. You see that Queens Anne County that gets 673, that's where Annapolis, Maryland is. As you see, Baltimore gets about 148 per person. Prince George's County, which is the most predominantly Black county in the state of Maryland, only gets $54 per person. Oh. And that's a great point. It's not about money, it's actually about where you live. They are targeting Black communities, no matter if you live in a very rich house or very poor, they are targeting your community around you. And so that is something. So can you see this number? Yes. So as you can see, Queens Anne County, where Annapolis is, more white, more rural. If you go all the way also to Allegheny County, that's $804 per person that they're getting in SRF funding. Again, Prince George's County, where predominantly Black folks live in Maryland, $54, right? That is you know, a crazy number gap when it comes to SRF per person. Oh, how do I go back? Okay, so I can keep going. So again, why does this matter? You know, water justice is an urgent issue of racial justice. As Black Americans and communities of color across the country bear the brunt of our failing infrastructure, discrimination in municipal water system is rooted in our nation's history. For as long as our cities have been segregated by race, local officials have found ways to deprive communities of color from access to essential water services. And so I also want to bring Jackson, Mississippi into this conversation, because this is a place where, again, discrimination has occurred and it continues to occur through a governor who will not give SRF funds to the city of Jackson because they, quote unquote, do not meet the disadvantage definition of getting funding from SRF, even though Jackson is one of the poorest communities in the state of Mississippi, and also is over 80% Black, and how they are not considered a underserved or disadvantaged community is beyond us. But when you talk about the water crisis and you talk about the water services, they like to put this on Black communities. They like to put it on Black mayors, Black elected officials, that we cannot, or as African Americans, we cannot govern ourselves accordingly, that we need an emergency manager, we need folks to come over us. But really, they have never given us the resources to actually thrive, right? They have never given us the right amount of resources to thrive.
Manufacturing.
Yeah, so how can you engage in SRF advocacy yourselves? And we're gonna do one more small group activity, and then we'll come back. But these are just some of the ways in which people can engage in SRF advocacy. One is just doing public records requests and seeing where is the funding and where is this money going with. Second is trying to engage with your local officials, again, to see where's our SRF dollars going towards. We know we got $200 million this year. Did it come to our community? What projects came to our community? So engaging with your local officials to see. Raising awareness with your federal officials. Right now, under this EPA, they are doing something called a Justice 40 initiative, which means that 40% of the EPA funding for clean water, stormwater funding should come to disadvantaged communities. We want to make sure that the EPA is holding steadfast to that. So making sure that you're engaging with your local EPA officials to make sure that your local governments are funneling at least 40% of their EPA funds to disadvantaged communities. The second is just building community. Events like this, making sure that what's happening in Detroit, we know what's happening in Chicago, and that we're all building a community around making sure that we all have access to clean and safe, affordable water. And then the last thing is partnering. If you're not already a part of a grassroots coalition or organization, becoming and partnering with grassroots coalitions and other community organizations. And so we're going to do one more small activity with your group. And I want you guys to talk about how y'all want to engage in SRF advocacy going forward. We're gonna give you another 5 minutes. Do you want to do more public records requests? Do you want to engage in local officials? Do you want to run for office? Do you want to have some type of place where there's a website and your local officials have to put where they're funding these projects at and put it on a public website so everybody in the community knows? So what are some of the things that y'all want to advocate for with your local officials when you go back and you leave here, so that you are equipped to kind of do some more SRF advocacy on your own? And so with that, I'll put 5 minutes back on the clock. So go back with your tables, talk about how y'all want to engage in that SRF advocacy. All right, y'all. And so we're almost done. I wanted to wrap up with just a few things. If you didn't learn anything from this presentation, I just wanted to leave you with three things. Three things about SRF. One is that the money and the funds are there. The state revolving loan fund, there should be more funds, but there are funds that are supposed to flow to your communities. The second thing I want to leave you with is that we do need to do some more digging, that the EPA alone is not going to govern themselves and govern local officials. So as advocates, we have to speak out and we have to dig in to where our money and and making sure they're funding disadvantaged communities. And the third thing I want to leave you with is that there are community organizations, grassroots organizations like Freshwater Future, like LDF, like We the People that are doing this type of advocacy and that are doing this type of looking into and making sure that the EPA and our local officials are actually putting money into disadvantaged communities and using the SRF funds to actually give us safe, clean, affordable water. And so with that, the next thing is questions. So if there are any questions, yep, please let me know.